Hello class, I did my paper on the Knights Templar, specifically the fall of the Knights Templar and what exactly happened to this um, stoic and premier military organization of the Crusades and of that time period. There was so much, so we're just gonna jump right in and hopefully I can finish before you get bored. Okay, um, so we're gonna start with the creation. The order was created during the Crusades. It was created because the Europeans making pilgrimages were constantly being robbed, beaten, raped, and some killed along the way. Um, and this moved 9 knights, led by Hugh of Paynes and Godfrey of St. Omer, um, to create this order to protect them. And that was their main goal, to protect the pilgrims. Okay, and with that, they took vows of chastity, poverty, obedience, as well as protection of the pilgrims. And then one key thing was they were only loyal to the Pope in and of himself. There were other military order, or not military, there were other orders that were set up that were loyal or had different missions to other monarchs, other people. The Templars were not. They were strictly beholden to the Pope. End of story. And this angered a lot of people, and we're going to get to that shortly. Okay, and how they got their name, the Templars, was pretty simple. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem gave this new order a wing in his palace, and the palace was thought to be the site of the Temple of Solomon, and so that's how they got their name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, and the Temple of Solomon. And during this time period, they were, like I said, really the premier fighting organization that came about. They became so big and so popular, um, that many started to join. Many other aristocrats started to join and turning over all of their holdings, all of their wealth, all of their property over to the Templars because they agreed with the Templar mission. Um, and they continued to grow over time. Um, One Arab chronicler noted that 600 Templars were captured and offered their lives if they converted to Islam, but only one apostatized, and the rest were willing to die. And that goes to show you exactly what type of willingness what type of loyalty they had to the Templars, to their faith, and to the Pope. And so, with all of this happening, with the um, with all of their holdings coming in, with people donating basically their fortunes to them, they had to do something with it. And so they entered the banking industry, and with that, they also needed professionally trained people in order to do that. They needed specialists such as lawyers, administrators, accountants, and they were even allowed to have their own priests at the time. And it was soon foretold that the Templar banks were the most reliable in all of Europe. If you use the Templar bank, and the banking industry at this time is a little different than what we have today, but if you use them, then you were very well protected. Okay, and so this went on for a few years, and they continued to grow and get bigger. And as they got bigger with the notoriety, with all of the romance that's spread across of how great the Templars are, they really attracted a lot of different knights and different people. The problem with that was is these people didn't necessarily have the same beliefs and have the same intestinal fortitude, so to speak, to be able to carry out the same mission that its founders wanted them to carry out. And so things started to change and falter. Okay, there was a big decline in spirituality. While they were still spiritual, they took a really notable decline. Um, and while they were still wealthy, they still kept asking for more money, from monarchs, aristocrats. Even though they were the wealthiest order, they still kept asking and asking and asking to be able to fund more crusades and fund this and that. And greed began to overwhelm the order. They started to acquire property fraudulently. They started to use the lawyers and administrators to acquire property, file um, faulty lawsuits of the time. Um, and they were actually really struck down by a pope for as much and telling them to stop it, so to speak. Um, they used a lot of more eloquent words than just stop it, but the pope essentially told them to knock that off and get back to doing what you're doing. But most of it was overlooked by the masses because they kept winning. If you keep winning, a lot of your warts tend to go away as long as you're winning. No one really cares what you do as long as you win. Um, but in the end, they became a living contradiction to the Crusader ideology. They became more about the money than what they were trying to do. And this is where um, a lot of mystery starts and a lot of intrigue starts. Okay, um, King Philip IV was the king of France, and he was very much the a nationalist, so to speak. He saw Jewish and Italians and other people use his kingdom for profit, and he was never able to make any make any money for his own people. And so what he did was he expelled all the Italian bankers and Jews from France and then confiscated their estates. And obviously that didn't sit well, um, but he did it nonetheless. And when large crowds came for King Philip, he took refuge in the Templar shelters. And this is where he really got a good feeling of exactly how powerful and how wealthy the Templars were. And as king, he felt threatened by this. And so, what any king would do, he ordered the arrest of all the Templars in France. And he never consulted the Pope. He just sent out an order and arrested all Templars. Um, and in doing so, he caught the Pope off guard, so to speak. He was able to torture the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, for 11 days before he finally confessed. And when the Pope heard about this, he was very troubled by what happened, and he was very up in arms. But upon hearing that um, the Grand Master Molay confessed, he sort of backed off a little bit. Um, Yet he still wanted to verify for himself. Um, Pope Clement was more of a very passive pope for the time, but even so, he found this really troubling that a king would arrest his knights, so to speak, and so he intervened. And he went and took over the investigation um, to make sure that what the king was saying was actually true. And upon investigating, all of the Templars recanted their confessions, basically saying this is wrong. We did it just because we were tortured, and um, so they were really at a standstill. But Philip, being as greedy as he was, um, he used canon law and had the Archbishop uh, Philip start trials immediately, and he didn't wait around for the Pope to be able to do anything about it. And they immediately started the trials, and judgment came very quickly. And soon over 100 knights were found guilty of heresy and executed by burning. And then this caused, if you know you're going to be executed, a lot of people decided to go ahead and retract their contractions, confess to heresy, because they would prefer to live rather than death by burning. And this goes to show you the stark contrast of um, the steadfastness of the founders and to what we have today uh, with the trial going on. The founders were ready to die for what they believed. They were ready to go meet their maker. Here, these knights are almost cowardice and hiding hiding behind this king who just wants this money. Okay, um, so with all of this going on, the Pope really had no other option. He had all of this backlash of supporting these Templar Knights for so long, and there was so much controversy going on. He really had no other option but to abolish the Templars. Even though he did not believe they were guilty, he issued what was called a bull suppression, and he really made the Templars not exist anymore. Um, and then he gave all of the Templars holdings, which are by far the most holdings of any other order, uh, to the Order of the Hospitallers, who had their own other mission. Um, while each order had some sort of military backing, the Templars were all military, and the Hospitallers were mostly, as it sounds, taking care of the sick, the elderly, the ones who got sick along their journey uh, to the Holy Land. Okay, King Philip was super upset by this because he felt the Pope would just give him all of their holdings, all of their land, all of their values, and just turn it right over to them. But since that didn't happen, King Philip issued an enormous bill above anything that he would ever have expensed for the trials, and the Hospitallers just promptly paid it. They didn't want to deal with any of the backlash going on. They wanted this to end just as much as everybody else did, because it was just such a scandal of the time. Everybody just wanted it to go away, and that's what happened, except for the Grandmaster um, Mole. He sat in jail this entire time because he appealed to the Pope for his sentence. He said, "No, I want to be heard by the Pope. I want him to judge me for my actions." Okay, and so he was in prison for 7 years, from the time that the king arrested all of the Templars until his trial. Um, like I said, he appealed to the Pope, but the Pope, like I said, was very weak. He wasn't going to he wasn't going to look Mole in the eye. He was just going to send cardinals in his place to excuse me, for the trial and to hand down any type of sentence that happened. Um, Mole was sentenced to perpetual imprisonment. They they found him guilty, but um, since he showed mercy or was lenient at the time, he was only sentenced to imprisonment. Okay, but on hearing this, he retracted his confession, and he was then punished by being burned to death. And it was just that fast. He was put to death that afternoon after they found him guilty. And you can see the picture there of what's been shown in a lot of art, um, in a lot of art studios and a lot of paintings of Mole being taken to his death because he essentially stood up for what he believed, that there was no wrongdoing, and a lot of the other people felt that same way, that they weren't doing anything wrong. Yes, they were they were taking advantage, but they weren't doing. what the king said they were doing. They weren't spitting on the cross. They weren't um, urinating on the cross. They weren't having massive orgies. They weren't doing these crazy things that the king of France said that they were doing. And I'll leave you with this quote that I found that was really touching. Um, they are seen to be both more gentle than lambs and more ferocious than lions, that I almost doubt what I should prefer them to be called, namely monks or knights, unless I should call them in fact most suitably by both names, in whom neither is known to be lacking, neither the gentleness of the monk nor the strength of the knight. Whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. How gracious are the victors who return from battle! How blessed are the martyrs who die in battle! Rejoice, courageous athlete, if you live and conquer in the Lord, but exalt the glory the more if you die and are joined to the Lord. For if those are blessed who die in the Lord, how much more blessed for those who die for the Lord. Um, and that's my paper. As you can see, the knights were basically overcome by greed. That's essentially what we all can take from this. They were overcome by greed. Another greedy man found a loophole to get their wealth, and he got their wealth. If they would have stayed the course, stayed with their foundation, then they would arguably still be in existence today. And so I hope this message finds you well, and Merry Christmas.